Millionaire husband marries his mistress' pregnant wife's reaction shocks everyone. Betrayal has a way of shattering everything you once believed in love, trust, and the promise of forever. This is the story of Evelyn, a gentle, devoted wife whose world crumbled beneath the weight of her husband's secret. It's the tale of Michael, once a promising husband who walked a perilous path with another woman, and Selena, a cunning mistress determined to steal what wasn't hers. As heartbreak collides with deception, Evelyn discovers they've planned a lavish wedding while she herself is carrying Michael's child. Brace yourself for unexpected twists, explosive confrontations, and a karmic reckoning. Neither of them will see coming. Evelyn could never have imagined the heartbreak that awaited her when she and Michael first met. They were two college students at Columbia University, she studying literature and he pursuing business. Their romance began quietly in the library, where Evelyn spent late nights working on essays about Shakespeare, while Michael was busy poring over financial statements and business plans. They'd exchange warm smiles and polite nods, slowly turning into friendly chats over coffee. One day, Michael mustered the courage to ask Evelyn to join him for a proper lunch at a nearby Starbucks, where they bonded over cappuccinos and laughter, sharing their dreams and fears with a raw honesty that felt far beyond their years. Their connection blossomed as they navigated the challenges of college life. While Evelyn's gentle spirit and supportive nature made her an ideal partner, Michael impressed her with his unwavering determination. He had big ambitions, envisioning himself as a top entrepreneur someday, and Evelyn found the drive irresistible. Their friends called them the power couple, Evelyn's imaginative creativity, balancing Michael's practicality. They planned their future in hushed tones after class, a dream wedding in a lush garden, followed by a honeymoon in Europe, and a life built on mutual respect, hard work, and genuine affection. After graduation, Michael landed a position at a promising tech startup in Manhattan. He worked tirelessly, sometimes staying late into the night. Evelyn took up a teaching assistant job, hoping to gain enough experience to become a professor. Those early years were challenging yet magical. They were a young couple in the city that never sleeps, forging their path. On weekends, they'd stroll through Central Park, share dinner at hole-in-the-wall restaurants, and talk about books, business, and eventually, children. 3 years into their relationship, Michael proposed. He wasn't usually the romantic type, but he pulled out all the stops: an intimate candlelit dinner, a band playing in the background, and a heartfelt speech about how she was his guiding light. Evelyn accepted with tears of joy. Their wedding took place at a charming chapel in Brooklyn, where they exchanged vows in front of close friends and family. Life was perfect, or so it seemed. Evelyn's devotion only grew as she supported Michael's growing responsibilities at the tech company. He climbed the corporate ladder with swift strides, eventually earning a position that paid handsomely. His evenings began to fill up with business dinners and networking events, leaving Evelyn at home more often than she would have liked. At first, she didn't mind. She believed in him and wanted him to succeed. When he was promoted to a regional director's position, they decided it was the right time to start a family. Evelyn, always nurturing, felt a new wave of excitement envelop her. Little did she know, the seeds of her heartbreak were being sown in those same boardrooms and business events. Late nights turned into weekend work trips. Work trips turned into suspicious absences. There were missing details in his stories, odd receipts in the pockets of his jackets. Still, Evelyn forced herself to ignore the signs. She chalked it up to stress, to the demands of a high-powered career. She reminded herself of the sweet words he once whispered on their wedding day, of the ring that sparkled on her finger, a reminder of his promise to remain true. But life has a way of unraveling secrets, no matter how carefully they're tucked away. As she prepared for motherhood, Evelyn would soon discover a darker side to her husband, one that would turn her once idyllic marriage into a battlefield. The calm she had known was merely the prelude to the storm about to crash down upon her, and in the eye of that storm, she would find a strength she never knew she had. Evelyn first met Selina at a company holiday party. Michael had mentioned her in passing a bright new hire in the marketing department. He spoke of Selina's keen business acumen and creative solutions for boosting the company's visibility. Nothing, he said, sounded suspicious. Evelyn was even a bit excited to meet this promising colleague her husband admired. That night, she dressed up in a shimmering navy blue dress, determined to make a good impression. The party was held at a rooftop lounge overlooking the New York skyline. Michael introduced Evelyn to the board members, fellow executives, and eventually Selina. She was petite, with striking features and an unmistakable air of confidence. Despite her warm smile, there was something in Selina's eyes that gave Evelyn a momentary chill. Evelyn noticed how Selina's gaze lingered on Michael as they chatted. It could have been simple admiration for her boss's success, but it felt too intense. Evelyn shrugged it off, telling herself she was overthinking. After all, her husband and Selina had a purely professional relationship, nothing more. Yet, as the night progressed, she saw Selina approach Michael again and again, each time placing a hand on his arm or leaning in too closely. Evelyn began to feel uneasy. Michael didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he chose not to react. In the following months, Michael became increasingly consumed by his work. Meetings stretched longer, deadlines piled up, and he often returned home late, exuding a mix of weariness and agitation. Evelyn tried to be understanding. She would greet him with dinner, offer him a shoulder rub, and never complain about the fleeting nature of their conversations. However, she couldn't shake off the nagging thought of Selina. Why did her name come up so often in Michael's stories about the office? Why was Selina always the one staying late to finalize reports with him? One afternoon, while tidying up the apartment, Evelyn found receipts for extravagant meals at upscale restaurants like Le Bernardin places. Michael never took her. She also discovered a small gift bag from a high-end boutique, empty except for some tissue paper. The date on the receipt coincided with the night he had claimed to be swamped with last-minute tasks. When she confronted him gently about these findings, Michael's response was a studied calm. He explained that the meals were merely business expenses, a part of courting potential investors. The gift bag, he insisted, was a token of appreciation for a long-standing client. He looked her straight in the eye, reassuring her that everything was above board. "You're carrying our baby," he said softly, placing a hand on her belly. "I would never do anything to jeopardize our family's happiness." Still, a sliver of doubt took root in Evelyn's mind. She felt something had shifted in their relationship, like a painting slightly askew on the wall. The illusions of security she had once clung to began to wobble. If Selina were just a colleague, why did Evelyn feel a faint pang of jealousy every time the phone rang with her name on the caller ID? Why did Michael's stories contain holes that never quite fit together? Instead of voicing her concerns openly, Evelyn buried herself in preparations for the baby. She wanted to believe that once their child arrived, Michael would feel renewed devotion toward their family. She arranged the nursery, choosing soft pastel colors and plush toys, as if painting over her anxieties with the soothing palette of motherhood. She forced herself to focus on the future she had dreamed of: happy family weekends in the park, bedtime stories, the child's laughter echoing through their home. Unbeknownst to her, the cracks were deepening. Selina, bold and ambitious, was more than just a talented employee. She had set her sights on more than a promotion at the company. The glimpses of her manipulative ways were evident in her flirtatious gestures, her cunning ability to align Michael's aspirations with her own. One day, Evelyn would come to realize that Selina was willing to step on anyone, especially a trusting wife, to reach the pinnacle of her desires. But for now, Evelyn remained in the dark, clinging to a fragile hope that love and loyalty would prevail. What she couldn't see was that the foundation of her marriage was already cracking beneath her feet, and eventually it would crumble. During her second trimester, Evelyn began experiencing morning sickness so severe that she decided to stay home from her teaching job. As the weeks passed, she spent more time alone in the apartment, a sense of unease growing within her. She had always believed in open communication, yet Michael was becoming an enigma. He was out the door at dawn and back well past midnight. One Sunday afternoon, she felt a sudden pang in her abdomen. Concerned for the baby's well-being, Evelyn made a quick decision. She would head to the hospital for a routine checkup. Michael was supposed to be at a conference, or so he claimed, so she called an old friend, Marianne, to accompany her. The doctor assured her everything was fine. Her body was simply reacting to stress and fatigue. Marianne, who had known Evelyn and Michael since college, grew worried. She pressed Evelyn about the stress, eventually coaxing out bits of the frustration Evelyn had been harboring. Marianne was thoughtful for a moment before suggesting that maybe Evelyn should check Michael's phone records or social media. "I don't want to plant suspicions," she said gently, "but your marriage is at stake and you deserve the truth." Evelyn nodded, torn between loyalty and fear. However, her own doubts pushed her forward. She decided to follow Marianne's advice. The very next day, as Michael slept off another late night, Evelyn carefully took his phone from the bedside table. Her hands trembled as she opened his messaging app. She found the usual work-related threads and then stumbled upon a conversation with Selina. The messages were brief, but every word felt like a cold knife cutting through her illusions. There were inside jokes, flirtatious banter, and references to private dinners. There was even an exchange about a weekend retreat that Evelyn had assumed was a business obligation. Reading the messages, she realized Selina had been at those dinners, and they seemed far from professional. The final blow came when she saw Selina's text. "I can't wait until we can finally share our relationship with the world. I'm tired of hiding." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared it would wake Michael. She quietly placed the phone back and rushed to the bathroom, tears streaming down her cheeks. How could this be? She was carrying his child, and yet another woman was the one he wanted to show off. In the days that followed, Evelyn sank into a tumult of anxiety and heartbreak. She began noticing more details. How Michael never let his phone out of sight when he was awake, how he became increasingly irritable whenever she questioned his schedule, and how the faint smell of perfume lingered on his clothes. She'd sometimes catch a glimpse of satisfaction dancing across his eyes when he mentioned Selina's name, as if his thoughts were floating back to memories he didn't share with his wife. But Evelyn wasn't one to jump to conclusions without evidence. Hurt and confused, she started meticulously collecting any shred of proof. Credit card statements, unexplained weekend trips, photos on social media. Late at night, she would scroll through Selina's online profiles, seeing pictures of her at fancy bars, museums, and restaurants. Occasionally she caught the edge of a man's sleeve or a reflection in a mirror that resembled Michael. Each discovery chipped away at Evelyn's trust until there was nothing left but a hollow shell of disillusionment. One evening, after another argument with Michael, Evelyn finally summoned the courage to confront him directly about Selina. Her voice quivered, but she held herself upright. He denied everything, of course, calling her hormonal and paranoid. In a fit of exasperation, he threw on his coat and stormed out, leaving her standing alone in the foyer, her pregnant belly a testament to the life he was supposed to cherish. Evelyn collapsed to the floor in sobs, realizing that something far more sinister than a fleeting fling was at play. As tears blurred her vision, she placed a protective hand over her stomach, silently vowing to do whatever it took to protect her unborn child. The unthinkable had been discovered. Michael was not just cheating, but building an entirely separate life with Selina. In that moment, Evelyn understood that the marriage she once treasured was in grave danger, and yet her resolve to fight back began to stir, fueled by the maternal instinct to safeguard her child and her own dignity at all costs. Evelyn's worst fears were confirmed, but she couldn't afford to break down completely. She had a baby on the way and, despite the betrayal, she wanted to salvage any semblance of normalcy. For the next week, she avoided a direct showdown, hoping Michael might realize the enormity of his betrayal and come to his senses. However, all she encountered was a wall of denial. Michael's moods grew increasingly erratic. Some days he showered her with apologies and kisses on the forehead, only to vanish for hours without explanation. Other days he was cold and distant, muttering excuses about pressing business matters. Evelyn oscillated between anger and longing, remembering the man she'd fallen in love with, trying to reconcile him with the stranger who now shared her bed. Determined not to be a helpless victim, Evelyn confided in Marianne once more. Over steaming mugs of coffee in her living room, Marianne helped her strategize. "You need to get your financial affairs in order," Marianne said, her expression filled with concern. "Open a separate bank account. Start documenting everything, especially if this leads to a separation or divorce. You have a child to think about now." Evelyn nodded, the gravity of the situation sinking deeper into her bones. The next day, she visited the bank and opened a private savings account. She began squirreling away small amounts of money, every deposit a glimmer of security in the midst of betrayal. She also started making copies of every relevant document: tax returns, property deeds, bank statements. It pained her to take such steps, but it was necessary. Meanwhile, at Michael's company, rumors were circulating. A few colleagues, aware of his late-night escapades with Selina, grew uneasy. While some admired Michael's business acumen, they disapproved of his personal conduct, particularly after hearing that his wife was pregnant. But Selina was cunning. She maintained a professional facade in the office, earning praise for her creativity in marketing campaigns. She excelled at controlling the narrative, painting Evelyn as an overly jealous wife. In hushed hallway conversations, she hinted that Michael's marriage was already on the rocks, and she was merely a supportive friend. Evelyn caught wind of these rumors through a sympathetic employee who emailed her anonymously. The message read, "Be careful. Selina is telling people you're unstable and trying to make Michael look like a victim. She's pushing for a public relationship soon." Feeling her blood boil, Evelyn realized the stakes were higher than she'd imagined. Selina was not just an interloper. She was orchestrating a takeover of Evelyn's life, brazenly rewriting the truth. One evening, Evelyn decided to tail Michael. It was something she never thought she'd do, but desperation drove her. After he left the apartment claiming to be meeting international clients, she slipped into a taxi and followed him to a luxury hotel in Midtown. There, from the lobby's corner, she watched him check in at the reception desk, hand in hand with Selina. Feeling a burning sensation in her chest, she forced herself to stay hidden, tears stinging her eyes. In that moment, Evelyn saw Selina laughing with Michael, leaning her head affectionately on his shoulder. She couldn't bear the sight any longer. Slipping out before they noticed her, she stumbled onto the street, the cacophony of New York's traffic drowning out the sound of her own anguished sobs. Any lingering hope for a peaceful resolution vanished. The betrayal was deeper than she'd imagined. They were flaunting their relationship publicly, as if they were already husband and wife. Her emotions vacillated between fury and despair. She wanted to confront them right there in the hotel lobby, but she held back, worried about the risk to her unborn child. Instead, she resolved to strengthen her position. She would gather enough proof of Michael's infidelity to ensure she and her baby would not be left destitute. The tension in her home was at a boiling point. Michael pretended everything was normal, while Evelyn quietly built her case. In the back of her mind, she knew a confrontation was inevitable, one that might shatter whatever fragments remained of their marriage. By the time she returned to the apartment, it was late. She paced the living room, her mind swirling with questions. How far would Selina go to claim Michael as her own? What would happen to her child's future if Michael decided to abandon them completely? She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing. The tension had risen to a point of no return, and sooner or later, something would have to give. The morning after her discovery at the hotel, Evelyn woke up determined. Her anger had crystallized into a cold, fierce resolve. When Michael came out of the shower, she confronted him in the bedroom. Standing there, visibly pregnant, she demanded to know why he'd been at a luxury hotel with Selina. Caught off guard, Michael tried to stammer out a denial, but Evelyn refused to be gaslighted. She recounted every damning detail, the date, the time, the hotel name. Cornered, Michael's face twisted in desperation. He spun a tale of a last-minute meeting with an investor who preferred an upscale environment. Selina was simply there to help with the marketing pitch, he insisted. His words rang hollow, especially when Evelyn presented him with the discreet photographs she'd managed to snap. It was clear Selina was more than just a co-worker. Their argument escalated rapidly, each exchanging accusations. Evelyn berated him for betraying their marriage at the exact moment when she needed him most. Michael lashed out, accusing her of being invasive, not trusting him, and sabotaging his career. The tension reached a fever pitch when Michael, with eyes ablaze, sneered, "You've never supported my ambition the way Selina does." That sentence cut Evelyn deeper than any blade could. Everything she had done, late-night dinners, sacrificing her own career plans, caring for him, meant nothing compared to the false flattery of a mistress. In the heat of the moment, Evelyn grabbed a vase from the nightstand and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the wall, shards flying everywhere. She stared at the shattered porcelain, breath ragged, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, Michael looked shocked, as though he'd finally realized how far he'd pushed her. But the shock quickly morphed back into anger, and he stormed out of the bedroom. Retreating to the living room, Evelyn collapsed onto the couch, clutching her stomach. A swirl of guilt, rage, and sorrow tore at her heart. She knew stress wasn't good for the baby, but her world was disintegrating, and she felt powerless to stop it. Moments later, Michael emerged, dressed and prepared to leave. "I can't stay here," he said bluntly, refusing to meet her eyes. "You're hysterical. I'll come back when you've calmed down." Evelyn wanted to scream, to block the door, to force him to face the consequences of his actions. But she remained silent, tears rolling down her cheeks as he closed the door behind him. The air in the apartment felt suffocating, heavy with tension and the ghost of the life they once shared. In the following days, Michael stayed away. He sent brief text messages. "I need some space. This is too much stress, and we'll talk later." Selina was obviously fueling his estrangement. Evelyn received a couple of calls from unknown numbers, the line going dead after a few seconds. When she answered one call, an acidic female voice spoke. "He's mine now. Stop clinging to something that's already gone." Then the line went silent. Evelyn guessed it had to be Selina, though she had never heard Selina speak so openly hostile before. Time stretched on. Evelyn continued attending prenatal checkups alone, feeling the sting every time the doctor asked if the baby's father would be joining her. She gave half-hearted smiles to acquaintances, brushing off questions about Michael's whereabouts. Inside, she was raging, grappling with betrayal, and bracing herself for the next blow. And the next blow would come. She sensed it in the way her phone rang less frequently with updates from Michael, in the haunting dreams that left her waking with a pounding heart. She had glimpsed a side of Michael that she never wanted to believe existed: cruel, selfish, willing to lie to her face without remorse. The confrontation had only scratched the surface. Deeper deceptions lay ahead, deceptions that would push her to the brink and force her to fight harder than she ever had before. Late one night, while browsing the internet in a desperate attempt to distract herself, Evelyn received a link from an anonymous email address. The message said, "Open this if you want to know the truth." Hesitant, her heart racing, she clicked on it. The link directed her to a website showcasing a wedding planning registry. She scrolled down and her blood ran cold. The page revealed a couple's profile with names Michael Davis and Selena Thompson. The wedding date was set for just 3 weeks away at the Ritz-Carlton, New York Central Park. Evelyn's first thought was that it had to be a hoax. How could her husband possibly be planning a wedding when he was already married to her? Yet, as she scrolled through the registry, she recognized details that could only come from Michael and Selena. There were references to Michael's favorite wine brand, a honeymoon fund for a trip to the Maldives, and even a mention of Selena's love for French patisseries. The magnitude of betrayal was so overwhelming that Evelyn felt nauseated. For hours, she just stared at the screen, tears of fury and disbelief carving hot tracks down her face. She reread the message from the anonymous sender, suspecting it might be someone from Michael's office who was tired of watching this sordid affair. It was clear that Selena and Michael planned to formalize their relationship in secret. Perhaps they assumed Evelyn wouldn't discover it until it was too late. The next morning, she made calls to the Ritz-Carlton to confirm the reservation, posing as an excited guest who had misplaced the invitation. To her horror, the hotel confirmed the booking for a lavish private ceremony. Evelyn's heart clenched, and she struggled to maintain composure on the phone. Once she hung up, she slumped to the floor, tears of utter despair ravaging her. This was beyond infidelity, it was an attempt to erase her entirely. She imagined her child growing up fatherless, while Michael built a new life under the same legal vow he had once exchanged with her. But how could he remarry when he was still bound to Evelyn? Was he planning a quick divorce behind her back, or, worse, forging some twisted scheme to invalidate their marriage? Rallying every bit of strength she had left, Evelyn sought legal advice. The lawyer she consulted was astonished by the situation. "If this is true," he said gravely, "Michael is not just committing adultery, he's potentially committing bigamy, which is a serious crime. Do you have evidence?" Evelyn showed him the wedding registry. The lawyer shook his head, perplexed by Michael's audacity. He urged Evelyn to gather more documentation and to be prepared for a legal battle. Evelyn felt a hurricane of emotions, outrage, betrayal, heartbreak, swirling within her. For the sake of her baby, she tried to remain calm, but there were moments when she nearly spiraled. She threw herself into ensuring she had all her bases covered. She photocopied their marriage certificate, collected bank statements, and forwarded every suspicious email to a private folder. She also recorded voicemails from Michael and screenshots of his text messages. The more evidence she compiled, the more convinced she became that she had to confront this head-on. In rare moments of composure, she found her mind drifting back to the early days of their love, the sweetness in his eyes. When he proposed, the gentle kiss on her forehead, right before they said, "I do." How could that man and the one plotting a second wedding be the same person? It felt like a stranger had taken over Michael's body and soul. As the wedding date approached, Evelyn's resolve hardened. She didn't yet know how she would use the information, but she knew she wouldn't hide in the shadows while Michael and Selena walked down the aisle. A storm was coming, and Evelyn would face it head-on. She just needed to figure out her plan and how to protect herself and her unborn child in the process. The wedding day arrived like a gathering thundercloud. Evelyn stood before her mirror, staring at her own reflection. Her belly was now unmistakably swollen, a testament to the life she carried. She dressed in a simple black maternity gown. It wasn't about blending in, this was about making a statement. Her eyes, once filled with tenderness, now glowed with steely resolve. With each step toward the Ritz-Carlton, her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She had pictured this moment countless times in her mind, each scenario ending differently. Sometimes she imagined Michael dropping to his knees, apologizing profusely. Other times she foresaw an explosive confrontation, culminating in security dragging her away. She was ready for anything. The hotel's opulent lobby bustled with wedding guests, many dressed in formal attire. Through discreet inquiries, Evelyn discovered Michael and Selina had chosen the rooftop terrace for their ceremony. An extravagant space filled with white roses, gilded chairs, and a panoramic view of Central Park. She took the elevator up, her stomach twisting in knots, as if her unborn baby could sense the upheaval. Evelyn arrived to the sight of Selina, radiant in a designer gown, gliding down the aisle. The officiant stood at the front, a slight look of perplexity on his face. Michael waited at the altar, his posture stiff, eyes darting nervously around. Maybe he feared a last-minute interruption, or maybe his conscience weighed heavily upon him if he still had one. The guests, probably a mix of Michael's business associates and Selina's friends, murmured amongst themselves. Some recognized Evelyn from company events, their expressions turning to shock. Others whispered, trying to piece together the scandal unfolding before them. Summoning her courage, Evelyn strode forward. Each click of her heels on the polished floor echoed like a cannon shot in the hushed atmosphere. Selina's eyes widened when she noticed Evelyn approaching. The officiant paused, uncertain whether to continue. Michael froze, color draining from his face. For a moment, time stood still. Then Evelyn's voice sliced through the silence. "Are you seriously attempting to marry this woman when you already have a wife and a child on the way?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Selina's face contorted from shock to fury. Michael, at a loss for words, took a stumbling step toward Evelyn. "This isn't what you think," he stuttered. But Evelyn would not be placated. Rage and heartbreak fueled her. She turned to Selina, eyes flashing. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You've been sleeping with a married man, and now you're trying to replace me?" Selina's veneer of poise cracked. With a sneer, she said, "Michael was never happy with you. You forced him into a life he didn't want." Before she could utter another word, Evelyn's open hand struck her across the face. The slap echoed across the terrace, and Selina staggered, a hand flying up to her stinging cheek. Pandemonium erupted. Some guests rushed to Selina's aid, while others tried to intervene. Michael stood there, paralyzed, torn between shielding Selina and appeasing the outraged Evelyn. In a surge of adrenaline, Evelyn turned to Michael. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our child. How could you do this?" She raised her hand again, this time pushing him back with all her might. He stumbled, nearly toppling over the steps leading up to the altar. Security personnel hurried forward, but several guests motioned them to let Evelyn speak. Some recognized the moral weight of her grievance. They seemed horrified to have unwittingly participated in a sham ceremony. Cameras flashed from every angle, capturing the unfolding scandal. In a shaky voice, Michael tried to salvage the moment, insisting there had been a misunderstanding. But it was too late. Evelyn's presence, her very real pregnancy, and the raw fury in her eyes had demolished any veneer of legitimacy. This wedding possessed. Evelyn's chest heaved, tears threatening to betray her stoic facade. She clutched her belly protectively. "I gave you everything," she choked out, her voice cracking. "And you repay me like this?" With that, she turned on her heel and strode away. A hush descended, followed by murmurs and gasps as everyone processed what had just transpired. The wedding was in shambles, guests scattered, the officiant whispered frantically with hotel staff, and Selina glared daggers at Evelyn's retreating form. Michael remained on the altar, looking like a man who had just witnessed the downfall of his entire life. In a single stroke, Evelyn had revealed the truth, shattering any illusions of legitimacy in Michael and Selina's so-called union. The storm she had sensed was here in full force, and it left destruction in its wake. In the wake of the disastrous wedding fiasco, the story went viral among Michael's professional circle. Photos snapped by wedding guests circulated on social media, painting a damning portrait of betrayal and scandal. The board of directors at Michael's company found themselves fielding uncomfortable questions from investors. How could their key executive be involved in such a public disgrace? Selina, once the rising star of the marketing department, faced harsh criticism. With her reputation tarnished, many of her peers distanced themselves out of fear that her downfall might rub off on them. Michael attempted damage control, but the scale of the scandal was too large. Not only had he committed blatant infidelity, but he had tried to marry another woman while still legally wed to Evelyn, an act that could lead to legal repercussions for bigamy. The company's leadership issued a statement condemning any unethical behavior among their executives, and an internal investigation was launched. Under immense pressure, Michael was forced to step down, citing personal reasons. Back at the apartment, Evelyn found herself grappling with a range of emotions. A part of her felt a grim satisfaction at the collapse of the wedding. Yet, she was also overwhelmed with sorrow and disbelief. She was still in love with the memory of the man she had married, but that man no longer existed. Days turned into nights as she struggled with anxiety, worried about the future for her and her child. Her close friend Marianne became her anchor, visiting regularly to provide comfort and help with everyday tasks. One evening, Marianne showed Evelyn a tabloid headline: "High-powered XX illicit wedding exposed by pregnant wife." The accompanying article detailed every salacious detail. Some of the quotes were exaggerated, but the core truth remained. "I'm so sorry you have to go through this," Marianne said, softly, hugging Evelyn close. Meanwhile, Selina scrambled to salvage her own image. She made public statements portraying herself as a victim, insisting Michael had lied to her about the status of his marriage. "I had no idea he was still with Evelyn," she claimed in an interview, but few people believed her. After all, Evelyn was visibly pregnant, and the timeline of events clearly overlapped with Selina's affair. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. Evelyn opened it to find Michael standing there, looking disheveled and defeated. He begged her to let him in, claiming he needed to talk. With a trembling heart, Evelyn allowed him inside. His eyes roamed around the familiar living room, as if he were an uninvited guest in his own home. "I've lost everything," he said, voice thick with regret. "The company forced me to resign, my reputation is ruined, and Selina, she's refusing to see me." His posture was hunched, shoulders sagging with the weight of self-inflicted disaster. Part of Evelyn wanted to scream at him, but another part sympathized with the man she once loved. "What did you expect?" she asked calmly, arms crossed protectively over her belly. "You lied to all of us. You tried to marry another woman while I'm carrying your child. Do you realize how insane that is?" He bowed his head, tears gathering in his eyes. "I was stupid, reckless. Selina, she encouraged me, convinced me you'd be better off without me. I thought she could help my career, my ambitions. But it was all a lie. I'm so sorry." Silence stretched between them. Evelyn could see the remorse in his eyes. But she also remembered the lies, the gaslighting, the heartbreak. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You betrayed not just me, but our child." Michael nodded, looking like a man lost in a storm without a compass. He asked if he could do anything to help her during the pregnancy. Evelyn wavered. Part of her wanted him completely out of her life, while another recognized that the baby deserved the chance to know its father. She finally told him to leave, and that she would talk to her lawyer about the next steps. After Michael left, Evelyn sank onto the couch, exhausted. The fallout was far from over. There would be legal battles, discussions about child support, and the emotional toll of raising a child without a stable family. But for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt a small glimmer of hope. She had stood up for herself, exposed the lies, and taken the first steps toward a new life. It would be a rocky road ahead, but she had the resolve, the proof, and the maternal love that would guide her through whatever came next. In the days following the thwarted wedding, karma seemed to land its blows hard and fast. Michael discovered that Selena had siphoned off a significant amount of money from their joint honeymoon fund, which he had foolishly set up. Initially established to plan an extravagant trip to the Maldives, the account had become a quick cash grab for Selena. When Michael confronted her about the missing funds, she merely shrugged and claimed it was her fair share for the humiliation she endured. It quickly became clear that Selena was never truly invested in Michael beyond what he could offer: financial security, business connections, and the thrill of stealing him away from his wife. Now that his career was in tatters, she no longer had any incentive to keep up the facade. She blocked his number, moved out of the apartment they had secretly been renting together, and was seen socializing at upscale bars, wooing new prospects. Word around the office was that she was already eyeing another executive, this time a married man with a wife who owned a successful skincare line. Michael tried to piece his life back together, but every door seemed to slam in his face. Companies that once courted him as a valuable asset refused to interview him, citing concerns about reputation risk. Friends he had in high places kept their distance, not wanting to be associated with his scandal. Even his own family expressed deep disappointment, going so far as to suggest he seek professional help for whatever led him to attempt bigamy. He would often call Evelyn late at night, his voice strained, begging for another chance. But each time, she reminded him that his choices had consequences. For Evelyn, the aftermath felt like an emotional tsunami that slowly receded, leaving debris in its wake. She was relieved that Selena had been unmasked for who she really was, but she still had to figure out her future co-parenting arrangement with Michael, who oscillated between remorseful and desperate. On her lawyer's advice, Evelyn proposed a formal agreement stipulating that Michael would cover child support, medical expenses, and maintain a respectful distance unless it involved the baby's well-being. Though life remained complicated, Evelyn experienced small victories. She sought part-time work tutoring high school students, using her background in literature to guide them through essays and exams. It was a modest gig, but it brought her fulfillment and a sense of independence. Marianne introduced her to a support group for single mothers, where she heard stories of resilience and triumph. Each story reminded Evelyn that she was not alone. Many women had navigated similar storms and emerged stronger. One bright day, Evelyn decided to treat herself to a quiet afternoon at Central Park. As she sat on a bench, watching children play and couples stroll by, she felt her baby kick. It was a reminder that new life was forming within her, untainted by the chaos swirling around. That moment crystallized her resolve. She would not let this betrayal define her or her child's future. Meanwhile, Michael's nights grew lonelier. He realized he had traded genuine love for a hollow dream of status and excitement. Each day without Evelyn and the prospect of a normal family only amplified his regret. He even visited the old chapel in Brooklyn, where he and Evelyn had exchanged vows, standing in the pews with tears streaming down his face, silently begging for forgiveness from a memory. Yet there was no escaping the consequences of what he had done. Selena, on the other hand, seemed to dance away unscathed, at least on the surface. She flaunted her new social life on Instagram, sharing photos of fancy dinners and exotic trips. Rumors circulated that her new suitor was another high-level executive with an unsuspecting spouse. Perhaps karma would come for her in time too, but for now she glided through life, free from the immediate repercussions that had befallen Michael. Yet Evelyn found solace in the knowledge that true karmic justice often takes unpredictable forms. She did not need to chase Selena for revenge. The universe had a way of setting things right. As for Michael, he had already tasted the bitter fruit of his own betrayal. His name was tarnished, his career in free fall, and his mistress gone. All that remained was for him to live with the regret and hope that someday, maybe, he could rebuild his life on a foundation of genuine remorse and honesty, lessons he had learned the hard way, too late to repair the damage fully. Winter melted into spring, ushering in the promise of renewal. Despite the emotional upheaval, Evelyn's pregnancy progressed well, and her doctor scheduled her for a due date in late April. As her belly grew, so did her determination. She threw herself into planning for the arrival of her baby, focusing on practical preparations like setting up the nursery and washing tiny clothes in gentle detergent. Sometimes she'd place her hand on her stomach and whisper, "We're going to be okay," as if the baby could hear and be reassured. Michael tried to stay involved, albeit from a cautious distance. He sent regular texts to check on Evelyn's health, occasionally offering to attend prenatal appointments. After much soul-searching, Evelyn agreed to let him accompany her to one final checkup before the birth. He showed up, looking somber and subdued, a stark contrast to the confident man who once led board meetings. In the examination room, the ultrasound machine hummed softly, revealing the outline of their child. Tears glistened in both their eyes as they watched the heartbeat flicker on the screen. For a brief moment, the memory of their happier times resurfaced, reminding them of what they had once dreamed of. But the reality was too fractured to gloss over. When the appointment ended, they exchanged a few polite words, and Michael promised to cover the hospital expenses. Then he left, taking his own regrets with him. A few days later, Evelyn's contractions started in the early morning. Marianne rushed her to the hospital, where Evelyn labored for hours, clutching the bed rails as waves of pain washed over her. In those moments, she wished Michael was there to hold her hand, yet she also felt strangely liberated. She was bringing a new life into the world on her own terms, surrounded by love from friends, not empty promises from a betrayer. At 9:43 p.m., her baby boy was born. The first cries of that tiny life filled the hospital room, and Evelyn felt tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. Marianne hugged her, beaming with pride. Exhausted but euphoric, Evelyn cradled her son in her arms, overwhelmed by the magnitude of unconditional love. 3 days later, as Evelyn prepared to leave the hospital, Michael arrived. He approached slowly, unsure of his place in this new reality. After an awkward greeting, he asked if he could hold his son. Evelyn hesitated, then gently placed the baby in his arms. Tears welled in Michael's eyes. "He's beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything I've done." Evelyn nodded, hugging herself protectively. "It's not me you need to apologize to," she said softly, gazing at the tiny face in Michael's arms. She knew the road ahead was uncharted territory. She was resolute in her decision not to reconcile with Michael romantically, but she also recognized the baby deserved a chance to know his father. They discussed a custody arrangement, with Michael agreeing to support the child financially and visit regularly. It wasn't the fairy tale family Evelyn once envisioned, but life seldom follows the script we write in our hearts. She understood now that some paths, once broken, can never fully mend. All she could do was move forward, focusing on giving her son a future free from the shadows of betrayal. When they arrived home, Marianne had decorated the apartment with soft balloons and a small sign that read, "Welcome home, baby Davis." The nursery was warm and inviting, painted in gentle hues of cream and light blue. Evelyn felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Despite the anguish and betrayal, she had found a new purpose: motherhood. Weeks rolled on, and with each passing day, Evelyn adapted to her new life. She learned to calm her infant's cries, to sing lullabies that soothed him to sleep, and to navigate the trials of single parenthood. Her heart slowly began to heal. She couldn't say she had forgiven Michael entirely, but she no longer carried the raw anger that once consumed her. Someday she might love again. For now, her focus was on herself and the baby who had given her life new meaning. And as she stood by the window one evening, cradling her child and gazing at the city lights, she felt a wave of peaceful certainty wash over her. The painful chapters of her past were behind her. A new beginning stretched out before her, a story of resilience, love, and hope, written not in heartbreak, but in the soft coos and gentle breaths of her sleeping son. Thank you for following Evelyn's tumultuous journey from the heartbreak of her husband's secret affair to the triumphant moment she took control of her destiny. Her story reminds us that no matter how devastating a betrayal may be, inner strength and unwavering love for one's child can guide us through even the darkest storms. Sometimes the end of one chapter simply marks the beginning of a far more empowering one. If you found yourself inspired by this tale of survival, heartbreak, and rebirth, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, real-life stories that resonate with courage and hope. Your support helps us continue bringing you content that uplifts, motivates, and reminds you that every setback can become a platform for a powerful comeback. Thank you for watching.